Hello and welcome to this video series in which we will build a Mancala game on Solana using the Fast Iteration Toolbelt that I built at Metaplex. The Mancala game is a very old game that's played all over the world. If you want to understand more about that, go ahead and Google that now. The rules are very easy to understand. There are two groups of tools that we will be using in this video series. One for code generation, namely Shank and Solida, and the other one to integration test our program and our SDK via Amman and the Amman Explorer in a local test validator. And you can see here that this is an iterative process where we will write the code of the program, then generate the SDK, test the code, and keep going until our Mancala game is complete. Let's look at some of those tools a little more in detail. So first off, the code generation part. So we have our Solana program, which lives in the program folder, maybe under lib.is, and then we will annotate it either with Anchor if you like Anchor, or we can use Shank if you just want to write a pure Solana program. And either of these tools will generate an IDL. And over here on the left, we have an example of Shank annotations that allow it to generate the IDL for instructions of our Mancala game. Once that IDL is generated, Solida then goes ahead and actually uses that IDL to generate TypeScript. For instance, here we can see that into the generated folder, it will generate the accounts, instructions, and errors, and so on. That generated code looks somewhat like this. Here we have an example of an instruction that has been generated by Solida, and we can see here that there are comments there. We can actually get IntelliSense, we can get pop-ups on the code, we can interact with the code, we could put breakpoints and so on, which is very helpful to understand how things work. We will then take the generated API and build an API on top of it that's a little more user-friendly, and then we will actually test all of this together with our tests that use that API. And as you can see, then here we are back to this feedback loop here where we basically will add our API, then test, and once we're happy with it, we can add more instructions, more accounts, and so on, and keep going, as I said, until everything is working the way we want it to. And to check that everything is working the way we want it to, we will be using Amman. So what is Amman? Well, Amman is basically a wrapper around the Solana test validator that runs locally on your machine, but additionally, it labels transactions and accounts, shows the most recent transactions, many more things that are also helpful to show in the Amman Explorer, and that make it a lot easier to understand what's going on in your programs and to also diagnose if things don't work the way you want them to work. Let's look a little bit on how you actually would interact with Amman. There are two options. You could either interact with the command line, which uses the CLI interface of Amman, or you could use TypeScript or JavaScript, which uses the TypeScript API that Amman also exposes. The CLI then connects to the Solana test validator via Amman and the Amman relay, and the TypeScript API does exactly the same thing, except that it also connects to Amman's mock storage if that is desired. And then all that works together to provide information to the Amman Explorer, which is very similar, as you can see, to the Solana Explorer, except that it has extra features. For instance, here it shows us the recent transactions, so we can quickly investigate the transactions that just ran in our tests or whatever we were doing. And below here, we see that the accounts here are labeled. Instead of showing long public keys, we actually know which is which. And finally, we can even resolve the account data to see what's actually in the account. And these states are stored in the relay, so we can go through the different account states. And even down here, we can see that we can provide a renderer for an account, which then will show up in the Explorer. And since things did not happen unless it's a demo, let's show one real quick with the Amman Explorer here on the right. Let's start up Amman and refresh the Amman Explorer to connect to this instance. And once that happened, we can run our tests below. And note that up here we're getting transaction logs, and on the right these transactions are coming in as well as the recent transactions. And we can see, oh, we had an error and we want to understand why, so we can easily just click on that transaction and look at what happened. We have the message here, and we can actually look at the account, the game PDA that was involved, and we can look at the different states here, right? So we can see that here in this transaction, the player changed the player that was to move. We can see what the game looked like at that stage. And in our case here, we are actually trying to move player B, tries to move from pit 6 and should be able to do so. So we can now inspect why our program is not allowing to do that. Was really quickly to figure that out. And we can see here that the last transaction here that caused that state to happen was actually that transaction that failed. It should be a very fun and interesting series. Make sure to subscribe to my channel in order to get notifications when the first episode drops. Especially if you're new to Solana or you want to learn more and you want to actually have fun while developing for Solana, I highly recommend you watching the series.